Welcome aboard the Bitcoin Express. My name is Chase. Let's get to it. In today's video, we're going to talk about what happens to Bitcoin if miners leave the network. And to start off, I'm going to give you a simple, basic, easy to understand explanation of who miners are, what they do, and why they're important. So miners on the Bitcoin network are the people or the computers that validate transactions and add them to the blockchain. So when person A sends a transaction to person B, it is these miners, these computers, these nodes that take that transaction and add it to the blockchain. So what happens is, let's say Joe sends Bitcoin to Brian. It's broadcast to the network. So all of these miners on the network, they all have a chance to take that transaction, pick it up, and add it to the blockchain. And they all have this opportunity, and they want to do it right. They want to add it, and they're going to receive a reward for it. So when they get that information, let's say, again, you have all these transactions of person A sending to person B and person B sending a transaction to person B. One of these miners picks up all of these transactions, they add it to a block, and if it is approved, if they are able to solve this puzzle, they can add that block to the blockchain. And if you can see the image on the screen in front of me, they call it a blockchain because you can visualize it as blocks of information. So if you can see block 1, block 2, block 3, and so on, they just contain information in it. It shows transactions and the dates they happened and how much was sent, and it's added to the blockchain. So you might be wondering, why would these people, why would these miners, why would they add these transactions to the blockchain, and why would they tell the truth? Why do they care if this actually works? The reason is because it's profitable. They receive a reward. They put money in to get money out. It's just like any business. When you have a restaurant or a bar, a movie theater, a clothing store, you have to buy inventory, you have to pay for employees, but you know in the end of the day, you're going to get that money back and more. So you put money in to make money. So what is the price to mine Bitcoin? What kind of money do they use? Well, it's through two things. It's through hardware and electricity. So to mine Bitcoin at the moment in March of 2020, you need an A6 miner, which is a computer that's more powerful than your regular home computer CPU. In the past, you were able to mine Bitcoin from your CPU, a basic laptop. Then you had to use a GPU, but now you need to use an A6 miner because over time it became more difficult. So you need more computer power. And the second thing that miners pay in order to mine Bitcoin and then eventually receive a reward is electricity. So not only do you have to have equipment, you also need to pay for electricity to mine Bitcoin. And it depends where you live in the world. Some countries have very cheap electricity and some countries have very expensive. But at the moment, in March of 2020, with the cost of hardware and the cost of electricity, there are many places in the world that Bitcoin is still profitable to mine, even when Bitcoin is trading at $5,000 or $6,000. So then if the price of Bitcoin goes down, people start to leave the network. And this is the reason why. So let's say you put in, it costs, I'm just going to use random numbers here. It costs $3,000 to mine Bitcoin and you get back $6,000 in return, right? So you put in $3,000, you get back $6,000. So you made a profit over there. But if the price of Bitcoin decreases, you no longer will be making a profit. So the same example I used, you put in $3,000 and you get back a Bitcoin that's worth $6,000, you made money. But what if the price of Bitcoin crashes to, let's say, $2,000? Now you're paying $3,000 to mine Bitcoin and you're only getting $2,000 back. So obviously what will happen? This person will no longer want to mine Bitcoin and they're not going to get a reward from it. And that's the question that we started out in this video. What happens to Bitcoin if miners leave the network? So as I just mentioned to you, if it's no longer profitable, people leave. Right now I'm on bitcoinnodes.io, which shows a live update of how many Bitcoin nodes are on the network. March of 2020, there are about 10,000 nodes. I was on this website, a month ago and 2 months ago, there was about 11,000 nodes. So we do see that Bitcoin miners are, slowly leaving the network because we did see Bitcoin go from $10,000 just a month ago, now at around $5,000, $6,000, and even hit closer to $4,000. And as miners leave the network, the hash rate decreases. So the hash rate is a sign of how difficult, how much power it takes to mine Bitcoin. So the more nodes are on a network, the more competition, it raises the hash rate. And between these nodes, between this hash rate, this is what makes Bitcoin so secure. It makes it decentralized. It makes it very expensive to attack. So what can happen to Bitcoin if miners leave the network? Well, if enough miners leave the network, and there's not a lot of people on the system to protect it, to validate transactions, and this hash rate goes very low, then it'll be very easy for someone to attack the network. And in Bitcoin or a cryptocurrency, they call it a 51% attack. That is when someone has more than 51% control of the network. And the lower the hash rate is, the less nodes are on the network, the easier it is for someone with hardware and electricity costs to take over half the network. So the risk is if too many miners leave the network, it makes the Bitcoin blockchain vulnerable. And to make matters even worse, there is something known as the halving, which is coming up in only 56 days from now. And if you're watching this video, a year or two from now, this same concept will apply because this halving happens every 4 years. So if it's I'm making this in 2020, but if you're watching this in 2024, the same concept will apply. There'll be a halving reward. Less Bitcoin will be provided to the miner that adds a Bitcoin to the transaction. So again, to give you a quick example, Joe sends Mike Bitcoin. It's broadcast to the system. A miner sees it. They pick it up. They add it to a block. They successfully add it. Now they get a reward. So again, let's say basics, it costs $3,000 to mine Bitcoin, and you're going to get a $6,000 Bitcoin in return. So you made money. Now, assuming the price of Bitcoin does not even change, it's still trading at the same price, but now with the halving, the reward is less. You're only going to get half of that reward back. So the same example where you put in 3,000 and got 6,000 back, now with the halving, you're going to put in 3,000 and only get 3,000 back. So you're no longer profitable. And this halving happens every 4 years. So on May 12th of 2020, the Bitcoin reward will decrease from 12.5 to 6.25 Bitcoin. So if the price of Bitcoin continues to remain low and it doesn't pick up, and we hit the halving and the reward is even lower, it's no longer profitable for people to mine in the network and they will leave. But this is the genius part about Bitcoin. This isn't a surprise. When Satoshi Nakamoto, the creator of Bitcoin, wrote the white paper, the outline of how Bitcoin will work, he, she, they, whoever Satoshi Nakamoto is, they understood that this would happen. The price could crash, people will leave the network, there'll be no incentive to mine. So there is a lot of psychology built into the code of blockchain, which really makes it so genius. And what's so special about it is understanding that people will leave the network. So by understanding this, it was set in the code that you can decrease the difficulty. So if you decrease the difficulty, it's now cheaper to mine Bitcoin and it can once again become profitable. So to give you an example of how it works, every 2016 blocks, the difficulty adjustment can happen. So the price that it costs to mine Bitcoin can change. And this is about every 2 weeks. So how do they base this? Where do they get these numbers from? So every 2 weeks, they look back at the previous 2 weeks, so the previous 2016 blocks, and they see how long it took to mine that Bitcoin. Bitcoin blocks should be added every 10 minutes. If so many people leave the network and there's not a lot of people validating and adding transactions to the blockchain, it's not going to take 10 minutes to add new blocks. It's going to take longer. So looking back on the period of the previous 2 weeks, the previous 2016 blocks, the code will understand that people have left the network. It's no longer profitable. We need to reduce the difficulty level to make it profitable again. And then eventually the price becomes affordable. So as I mentioned, let's say we were talking about the case that it costs $3,000 to mine a Bitcoin and get $6,000 back. And then over time, the price reward it becomes so low. Maybe it becomes $2,000. So people start to leave the network now. It's no longer profitable. But as they leave, the difficulty adjustment will reduce. So no longer will it cost $3,000 to mine the Bitcoin. Now it might cost $1,000. And again, this makes it profitable. Right now, the hash rate is very high. The Bitcoin network is very secure. March of 2020. We're not at all-time highs in hash rate, but we're near them. But even looking back at 2018, and if you can see the screen in front of me, we're way higher right now in 2020 than we were in 2018. But even in 2018, the network was very secure. Even in 2017, the network was very secure. So if miners leave the network, it's built into the system that it will once again become profitable. Now, the only threat to this system of Bitcoin's blockchain is if miners leave the network permanently and they don't come back. If the price of Bitcoin stays low and it continues to go lower and lower and lower, it can reach a point. It's very possible it reaches a point where miners just don't want to be on this network anymore. But as I mentioned, this difficulty adjustment, it's a lot of psychology involved in it. It makes it that Bitcoin most of the time should be profitable. But again, no one has a crystal ball. No one knows how things will play out. But this is a very important concept to understand in blockchain, in mining, and why people will continue to mine Bitcoin in the future, even after we see these price crashes of 50, 60, 70, or even 80%. I hope that you found value in today's video. And if you like my content, show some love. Subscribe to the channel, put your comments below. I know this video might have had some terms or ideas that were a little technical and you might have questions on them, so just put them in the comments below and I'll answer them for you. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.